welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, the only show on Indian television where you, the MSME, get center stage. This is 18 Hours Special Daily Initiative to give MSMEs and entrepreneurs the opportunity to be front and center on every industry and area that matters to you. Tonight on Influencer, we're bringing you two conversations. First up with the founder and CEO of Monkeybox, and later on the show, a conversation with the CEO of Smart Shift. Now, the food tech space in India is no stranger to innovation, eyeballs and investment, but this company has found a niche in that space and is betting big on that. Monkeybox provides nutritious meals for school children, thereby taking just one thing off the plate of harassed parents. I caught up with Sanjay Rao of Monkeybox earlier. Take a listen. Sanjay, thanks very much for speaking with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow. Let me start with the name behind your startup. It's a very unique name. Why did you decide on that name? What is the story behind it, if there's a story behind it? And run our viewers through what they should know about your startup.
Okay, so the reason why we started working on Monkeybox is I found it difficult to provide a nutritious meal for my kids day in, day out. As both parents were working, it was difficult to spend quality time in preparing the right meal for the kids. So that's when we had a discussion with a lot of parents and found that this was a rampant need. They wanted nutritious meal, but they were not able to provide because of the time constraint. So that's when we started working on doing sampling exercise, and from January 2016 is when we started rolling out in multiple schools.
I'm curious to understand why you felt the need to offer subscription boxes for children, for kids, Sanjay.
See, subscription model is much better on the unit economics because we know exactly how many boxes has to be delivered, and kids don't have an option of eating out just like what the adults have in the corporates, right? So that's where we said there is a lot of food wastage which can be curbed using subscription model, and the bulk delivery will lend itself into a better unit economics model.
I want to talk funding. That's something that every entrepreneur has an opinion on and has at some point or the other of his or her life done in their entrepreneurial journey. Talk to us about your own funding journey, as well as whether it's easier to now raise funding given that there's been such a plethora and explosion of startups in the food space. So has it become easier to raise funds?
We've been hearing a lot about food sector not able to raise money, but since our model is very different and lends itself very well for a lot of things like sustainability, reduction of food wastage, environmental friendly and subscription model focused on building a future generation healthier, it was easier for us to raise funds. The second thing is it's bulk boxes going into one single point of delivery. So that's where our logistical cost is very minimal, whereas compared to any other on-demand food delivery model, there is a lot of food wastage and then a lot of cost at the logistics as well as packaging. These are the three important things which is working out extremely well for this particular model, and that's where we are making money. Since it's a subscription model, day in, day out, it has to be delivered. One is the infrastructure itself has to be available. Two, the kind of consumers we are talking about is mostly software professionals or a businessmen where both the parents are working who can afford this kind of pricing.
A few of your peers in this space seem to have shut shop. How have you been able to make money then in this market, Sanjay? What would you say is your differentiator, your USP that has helped you sustain in a market which clearly has been going through a lot of changes?
See, the entire model itself is completely different. On-demand model basically has, as I said, a lot of food wastage. Here we are talking about healthy and tasty food for kids. The menu doesn't repeat for 21 days. The parents don't have to worry about what the kids eat on a daily basis because it is following a standard on RDA. We cover 70% of the requirement from RDA. It's completely different compared to any other businesses in the food sector.
You seem to be fairly active where acquisitions are concerned. What areas though will you look at next, if I can ask you a very forward-looking question?
The reason why we acquired a couple of companies earlier was it was lending itself to adding value to what we are doing. For example, cold pressed juice is what we need to start putting onto our menu for kids, which is not there for any of the sector which we are talking about. And going forward, we will definitely look at options or companies which will help us beef up our content strategy.
All right. What are your growth plans like, Sanjay?
Our growth plan is very planned out completely. Next year, we are going into multiple cities, which will be Hyderabad and Chennai. And post that, we will look at Pune, Mumbai, and Gurgaon area. These are the areas which will be very similar to what we are doing in Bangalore. The strategy is to look at getting to about 250,000 subscriptions on a daily basis in the next 3-4 years. So we are right now focusing on metro, but in the plan we also have tier 2 cities like Jaipur, which has a bigger base of students.
Sanjay Rao, thanks very much for speaking with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow. Time for a break. On the other side, we will bring you an influencer segment with Smart Shift. Do stay tuned. Welcome back. You're with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow. And tonight on Influencer, we bring you a conversation with Smart Shift. It's not that often that we talk about the logistics space for small businesses in India, but the Mahindra Group has recognized just that and is betting big with Smart Shift, its digital mobility startup. I caught up with its CEO Kausalya Nandakumar to talk about how the trucking industry is undergoing a change, the impact of GST as well as innovation in her sector. Take a listen. My first question to you, let's talk about your journey to joining Smart Shift, what that has been like, what the process has been like, what some of the highlights of that journey has been like, Kausalya.
Yeah, so almost exactly 3 years back was when the idea was conceptualized. In fact, from launch, we turned 2 on 21st of October. So we're now into our terrible twos very quickly. So about 3 years back, a small team of us were actually working on an idea that the small commercial vehicle owners need a lot more effort on the ecosystem which surrounds them to improve their earning capabilities. So, you know, as a large auto manufacturer, we sell a large number of small commercial vehicles. And what happens is once you sell the vehicle, this particular entrepreneur who has bought the vehicle is now looking for ways and means to improve his livelihood through the vehicle. And therefore, we were most intrigued by the ecosystem which surrounds him. And we ended up spending close to 2,000 hours meeting entrepreneurs who are using our vehicles as well as the customers whom they're serving across 4-5 states. And we got a bunch of insights. But the biggest insight at that point was that there is a huge amount of information asymmetry in this market. There is a huge amount of scatteredness and there is a great need from both people they serve as well as the vehicle owners to create a meeting point, and a meeting point that is mutually a win-win and a compatible solution. Sure. And it was also the time when the era of digital companies coming together to solve these information asymmetries. So the power of the internet, the power of IoT were all coming together, and it was a good time.
I want to talk about GST. Everyone, of course, is talking about how GST has impacted every business, no matter what the industry is. What's it been like for the logistics space?
So if I look at MSMEs, the micro, small and medium enterprises had a particular fashion in which they were operating and they were paying tax. When GST came in on 2 levels, one, certain specific industries saw a dramatic increase on the slab of tax that they were paying, making many industries feel that they are fundamentally financially unviable then to work in those kind of margins. So timber, for example, went to 28% tax. It's a high volume, low margin game. So who do you pass on this tax element to? Textile, as we are aware, went in fact they even protested, and today there's a rollback happening. So the MSMEs actually struggled on 2 levels. One is overall, where tax slabs increased, they were unable to figure out how to pass on the burden to a consumer in a highly competitive form. And the bigger element, I think, was understanding of how to comply. because largely GST also brought in a fair number of new elements of compliance. For example, the 3-time filing in a month, which now they are looking at rolling back. So MSMEs were also confused, how do I file? How do I even raise an invoice? And because GST actually gets applicable across the value chain, every vendor of yours, every supplier of yours, and every recipient has to be tax compliant and within the GST framework for you to ensure that your business viability exists. So people were also confused how the value chain would work. In the case of large companies, I think the advantage that many large companies have is that we have a bunch of consultants who are helping us through navigate this process, and SMEs are feeling a little lost. In terms of how would they navigate through all of this. In fact, we started a help desk as well to enable them, because they have a lot of queries on, tell me how do I file even.
Sure.
And I think the IT backup also had to be much more robust for them to actually be able to successfully file, right?
Sure.
So I think 2 levels. One, the slabs itself, which I think now the ministry is also reworking. And the second was the actual process of compliance, which became a lot more complex for MSMEs who are not used to it and who don't have large teams doing this for them. So the combination impacted logistics because your consumers actually started shrinking. We had a lot of customers who were holding back, saying that we have demand, but we don't know how to comply, and therefore we will wait until we understand it and then do it.
I will come to the pricing bit, but so far we are talking about the challenges. But I understand that given that GST for the logistics industry has of course come on the back of the government aggressively pushing, a cold chain, for instance, warehousing, for instance, it is now with GST allowing companies to rethink their supply chain. Is that coming as a benefit, and what does that mean for one, the logistics companies, and 2, what does it mean for the companies that are using these logistics?
So I think the overall coming together of the infrastructure and the taxation, especially the interstate taxation, has been very significant. If I look at what was the biggest hurdle for us is moving a vehicle with goods from one state to another. With the advent of GST, IGST coming in, that has definitely got streamlined. And the big ask, which is now companies having warehouses in every state, which was the original task because you wanted to make sure that you are VAT compliant and you wanted to take leverage of VAT in every state. Some states had a better system, some states didn't. So I think a lot of consolidation will now start happening. It's already started happening in the interstate movement. In terms of intra-city, we have largely remained as is because the movement is happening within a peripheral of a city which was anyway governed by the same taxation laws.
Okay, but then what is your advice to an MSME, to a small logistics player, about how, one, to be able to fend off competition from larger players like yourself, and 2, because the industry is changing and you're expecting consolidation, to be able to have relevance, to have a USP, to be able to survive in this market?
So I think that the era of entrepreneurship will continue to grow. It is not that MSMEs in this space will die out. It is about how they accept and face the future in terms of what kind of platforms they use for themselves to get to the next advantage of scale. So if I would look at ABC transport agency in some small suburb of Bombay, he may have 5 trucks which he is now operating. And the biggest issue for him is to get viable business for each of those trucks at all given point of times. Today, digital aggregators like us and larger companies are looking to consolidate this base of people and give them access to demand. So one is join the future, come into the network of more organized players and provide your services, because our overheads as a large company gets amortized over a larger base, and digital companies are very light anyway. So adopting a digital front to yourself, leveraging the multiple platforms already available to kind of get that economy of scale that you alone could not get would be 2 major things that smaller logistics players would do. Having said that, the fundamental success factor for them is the fact that they're able to at a local level manage operations. So continue to have the nimbleness to manage your operations and leave the marketing and the demand management to maybe a consolidator like ours, and get the combination going, and that's the most viable element, because the fact that India is a very vast country and we still have 63% of all BTKM going through road means that to touch every corner, road will be important, and small and medium enterprises in this space will be required. It is not possible for India to have one large fleet company which owns all the trucks. So this is a great way of continuing your entrepreneurship journey, but leveraging platforms, whether it is leveraging an Uber or an Ola as an entrepreneur in the personal mobility, or leveraging platforms like SmartShift in the cargo mobility. That would be facing the future and embracing it and making yourself digitally ready, because the future of large corporates or small SMEs who are going to give you demand is they're going to expect all the conveniences and all the aspects of larger digital companies at your rate. So you will have to figure out and embrace that and move forward, because then you will no longer have a value proposition left to consumers who are actually going to finally pay you for the service.
Okay. Do you see enough of the customers that you work with, do you see enough of the small businesses in the logistics space, your peers, understanding the use of technology in the logistics space? Are you happy with the level of technology that small businesses are using in the logistics industry? If not, what do you think is going to change that?
Technology costs money. Whether it's using a simple GPS device and a telematics system, and again in that value chain, logistics as an industry has been so scattered and we've worked on very low margins. So everybody's figuring out, if I use technology and that's going to cost some money, how do I pass on?
Even if you're using the cloud?
Yes, there is always a cost to it. It could be minimal. And the second element is, there is an X amount of cost and I have to convince the consumer that there is an X square or an X to the power 10 value coming from it. So sometimes it's very difficult for logistics players to go and say, you know what, I have a great tracking and tracing device to a large corporate, and they'll say that's great for you, but I'm going to call you if my truck doesn't reach. So we need to figure out a way of transferring disproportionate value even to customers so that their willingness to pay for that service and take that level up is very high. So I think that's the conundrum, that there is technology available. It's coming at a cost. It may be fairly rationalized if you're large enough, but if you're small, it's heavy because people also work on scale even in the IoT industry. And once you've put all this hardware in and you've started developing this, who's going to pay for it? At least initially you will need support until you reach that scale. So I think people are definitely adopting. Last count, I think Traxon said there are 73 startups, tech startups in logistics in just intracity, which is very interesting. And obviously you have very big players now coming in the interstate, intercity movement. So the future has come in. MSMEs are still feeling their way around it. One can always say that they're doing it slower than they should, but it also needs government intervention sometimes. It needs support, it needs education, it needs exposure. And technology is something where you have to be able to demonstrate the proof in the pudding, where it actually tangibly adds value to either your digitization efforts internally or the fact that you're able to add more value outside. So I think MSMEs will move. They're already moving, but sometimes the rate at which they move seems much slower than what you would like. But that movement has started, and logistics, very honestly, as an industry, has been slightly ignored. It's not a very glamorous industry. It's not a consumer internet companies. So we're doing stuff. It's just much quieter and much more rational kind of usage of technology into that space.
You were just talking about Ola and Uber, and I want to talk about regulation. There's been a lot of commentary where the cab aggregation space is concerned, but as far as commercial vehicle aggregation is concerned, has regulation really kept up with the kind of changes that the industry has been seeing?
So I think in a way we are lucky, because we came into the industry when the GTA norms were already well established. And India had already seen a large influx of 3PL, even 4PL players coming in and providing these kind of services which were already into the ambit of shared services, and therefore to a large extent regulation has already been there in place for cargo movement, because we've traditionally had the concept of goods transport agencies for a very long time in India. And therefore, being the way we are, we're just a part of that already existing framework. I think where the government came a little later was essentially understanding how e-commerce and digital players like us would actually come into the ambit.
Sure.
But it has been actually easier because passenger movement had tremendous amount of city regulations as well. In our case, goods move through goods transport agencies. So it has been much more smooth sailing in that sense in terms of understanding where you stand.
A quick last question then, what are the next few years looking like for you?
We're now in 6 cities and it's been a great journey. Last 2 years we got into the major metros, and India is also about this entire new India emerging in tier 1 and tier 2. So we're very excited about that. We hope to be in 29 cities by the end of 5 years, that's for sure. And we have this ambition that MSMEs as a sector is a sector that's largely underserved in terms of digital companies coming in and adding value. And they are hungry because they want to be competitive, they are desirous to grow, and India is about the MSME. It is the biggest sector which creates employment. So we are very committed to that space. We want to work with MSMEs and we want to work in logistics, and we want to make sure tech creates that kind of value that an MSME could have only imagined, and it belonged to the privileges of the larger companies. So we want to take the tech and show to him that even if you're an MSME, even if you're a micro enterprise, you get the same value on a core service like logistics at the price that you're willing to pay and capable of paying, so that you remain competitive. So that's the vision. We want to touch 1 million stakeholders by the end of 3 years. So that's.
Wish you all the very best.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much.
That wraps up tonight's episode of Leaders of Tomorrow. If you have any queries for us, you can always email us at leadersoftomorrowtimesgroup.com. On social media, tweet at me at Sunanda_J or LOT_ET now. Our Facebook page is Leaders of Tomorrow and ET now. You can also call us on the number you see on your screen. We love hearing from you, so do leave your questions and your feedback for us. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.